Episode 87A, the 1974 Boston Busing Racial Crisis. 51 years ago, Boston was changed forever. At the beginning of the 1974 public school year, a federal court-imposed school desegregation regime began. The white citizens called it forced busing, unquote. The black citizens called what was then existing at Boston schools de facto segregation, quote. Many city officials, citizens, and journalists ignored the 3 decades of black folks organizing against segregation and for educational equality. That led to Judge W. Arthur Garrity Jr.'s far-reaching ruling in Morgan versus Hennigan, issued on June 21, 1974. The pervasive opinion among most white folks at that time was that black people were less intelligent and also less concerned about their children's education. The NAACP filed a federal lawsuit in 1972 that started the legalities. At that time, black people made up only half of 1% of the city's teachers, and there were no black principals in the system. So it really was the unspoken policy of the Boston School Committee and the Boston school system to hire only white professionals. 4 of Boston's school district 13 black schools had been recommended for closure for health and safety reasons, while 8 other schools needed repairs to meet city standards. Per pupil spending averaged $340 a year for each student white and $240 a year for every black student. The curriculum at many black schools was outdated. Rather than advising black students into college preparatory coursework, the school district instead primarily directed them into manual arts and trade classes. The start of the school year on September 12, 1974, saw some of the ugliest anti-desegregation demonstrations in the history of the civil rights movement. White crowds harassed black students trying to desegregate white schools, and it often turned violent. Thousands of white families kept their children home rather than sending them to a desegregated school. City council members and the police union announced their opposition to Garrity's plan. White people stoned buses carrying black elementary school students. Black children were injured and 18 buses were damaged. Black students desegregating South Boston High School were met by a mob of local whites throwing rocks, bottles, eggs, and rotten tomatoes and yelling, "Niggers, go home," unquote. The situation grew worse over the weeks. Fights broke out in the schools, and white crowds continued their attacks on black students and bystanders. It was unfair to all. I lived there, and I had mixed emotions about it. I was sympathetic to the mostly Irish parents in South Boston and Charlestown, and to the Roxbury black parents also. Both groups were patsies. The decision-makers, forced to act by Garrity's order, did not choose the more middle-class sections of the city, like Jamaica Plain, Hyde Park, or Rosendale. No, they chose the poorest neighborhoods for their Frankenstein-like plan. Both groups of poor kids were getting inferior educations and falling down schools. They were forced by federal dictate to send their kids by bus to what they thought were dangerous and unfriendly parts of the city. I had some friends living in both Charlestown and the Southie, and I had worked with some people from Roxbury also. And also, years before the busing, I had a real estate office in Roxbury, so I knew some black folks from that experience. Everyone living in the Boston area was affected in some way. Either their kids were put in harm's way or they were impacted by the strife and the violence caused by that ill-conceived plan. Federal Judge Arthur Garrity, who by the way lived in Wellesley, one of the wealthiest towns in America, was the author of the court decision forcing that crisis. Of course, he had no skin in the game. In addition to the racial gerrymandering of the schools, the school committee reserved the overwhelming majority of jobs for white applicants through racially discriminatory hiring and promotion practices, as I previously said. When William O'Connor became the new head of the Boston School Committee years before, he made the following statement, quote, "We have no inferior education in our schools. What we have been getting is an inferior type of student," unquote. Fellow school committee member Joseph Lee concurred, saying, quote, "The Negro can make their schools the best in the city if they attend schools more often, on time, and apply themselves," unquote. Such cultural arguments blaming black students and their parents for educational inequities provided a palatable way for Boston's many hypocritical liberals to justify segregation in different terms from those bigoted Southerners. Quote, "I see Belfast out there," was a quote from the serving mayor Kevin White, referring to the ferocious battle over Ireland's freedom from England. Police had to escort and unload buses at several Boston high schools every morning and afternoon. Police snipers stood guard on the surrounding rooftops. Metal detectors were installed and troopers patrolled the cafeterias, hallways, and stairwells, and even then, racial brawls broke out daily. Garrity also ordered equal numbers of black and white police officers to guard the schools, provoking racial hostility even within the police force. Quote, "It'll be lucky if the Boston police don't kill each other before the day is out," unquote, said one state trooper at the time. For 3 years, as many as 300 state police officers a day patrolled South Boston High. One teacher compared the school to a prison. "We can't leave school. We can't come in early or on weekends to do preparatory work. We are like prisoners. Every day when I get up, it's like getting up to go to prison," unquote. In some 400 orders, Garrity meddled in every aspect of Boston's public schools. He placed South Boston High into federal receivership and fired its popular principal. He decreed rigid racial quotas in the faculty and administrative hiring. See episode 87B for further on this busing issue. This is Rod Murphy. Thank you for viewing or listening to my podcast episodes. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, and if you so choose, I ask you to send a good review and or refer a friend who might be interested in this Old Boston podcast series. Again, my thanks.